everyone. Welcome to the lab. This is Kel, and I'm here with Cody as always, but we also have a special guest, James Bennett, here to talk about his new book and about his journey. So before we get into everything, let's catch up with everybody. How y'all doing? How you doing, Cody?
Pretty good. Nothing crazy. Overall, pretty good week. So can't complain. How about you
Awesome.
guys?
Starting off strong for the Sunday. How you doing, James?
Yeah, I'm good. Went out to dinner last night with my parents and my wife for all of their birthdays that fall in March. So yeah, really nice time.
Fun.
Nice. Remind me, are you back in California now?
Yeah, I live in San Diego in like the North County part.
Hey, we're in
You
the
and
same
Cody
state.
holding down the California
Yeah,
folks.
Cody, where are you in California?
I'm still quite far from you. I'm in Northern California near Sacramento.
Got
So
it.
unfortunately, you're like another state over still.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a long state, but hey, we are in the same time zone at least. So.
yeah, definitely.
Are you guys, I imagine, have very vastly different weather. Is spring sprung?
Spring is sprung here as well. It's probably a little warmer down there, I'm assuming, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I think it's gonna hit 70 today. We're getting like a little bit of rain here and there. It's great for my succulent garden.
Oh,
But
nice.
yeah, it's nice today.
Oh, I'm so jealous. Actually, we have sunshine for the first time. It snowed earlier this week, so I'm ready to be done with
Yeah,
it.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it's March. It's time to move on.
Yeah, the damn groundhog, though. He said it was going to be winter for a while longer, so we'll see. We'll
Yeah,
see.
it's like guys.
So we brought James on today because he wrote a book, and I'll have it right here, maybe. No, I must have put it on my bookshelf out in the fault. But
out, out in the woods.
it's out in the living room. We just
Oh.
finished painting all that jazz. Um, but James wrote a book called "Spilling the Tea," and I read it, and I really connected with it. Um, so we kind of want to let you introduce yourself, James. So if you just want to give us a little hint, or our listeners a little taste of who you are, and then we'll kind of dive in a little further.
Sure, thank you. James, I was born in Australia, moved to California when I was 10 with my family. I went to school in Santa Barbara. I work in medical device quality assurance, pretty exciting stuff. I have a son who's a year and a half and been with my wife for 7 years this year.
Nice.
And we are expecting a girl in June, so another exciting
Oh,
chapter to start soon.
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I transitioned. It'll be 10 years in June. Um, so yeah, the book captures a lot of the things that were sort of trapped in my head for many years, and I felt I needed to put down. So yeah, really excited to chat about it.
Awesome. That's very cool. That's got to be lining up with you, Cody, right? About 10 years?
Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was December is
Nice.
10 years, so yeah.
Heck
It's
yeah.
crazy, right? To think about it being a decade. It feels like it's been 10 years, but then it also feels like it just started. It's a weird feeling
Yeah.
of that time.
Yeah, so you
Yeah.
feel like when you start, you're like 10 years, like I'm never gonna get there. That's so far away. And then before
Yeah,
you know it, here we are.
yeah. It's
Yes.
exciting.
It's crazy. It's so crazy to think about it. Was it kind of weird uh thinking about your transitioning and kind of writing it all down? Because like I feel like you wrote the book about your transition, and Cody has been vlogging about his for so long. It feels like you guys have both been um very open with your documentation. I kind of am curious about how that was writing it down like that.
Yeah, I've always loved writing. It's been a really helpful outlet for me for many years. When I was younger and starting my transition, I remember wanting to write it down and like put it out there, sort of as a resource. It's a memoir in the sense that I have to write about my own experience because that's all I have, right? But I also just felt like there was so much that isn't talked about outside of just the physical components. And navigating through life, I would write about it. I did some video stuff just for myself to remember it, which was a trip watching back like 2016. I'm sure it's the same for you, Cody.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, I started writing right around the time COVID started. And then when I was furloughed, I was like, okay, now this is the time to really sit down, write 6, 8 hours a day. It felt like going to a very intensive like therapy camp for, 2 or 3 months when I initially put it all down on paper.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Like, well, and it's so condensed, I feel like, to remember it kind of all that while like looking back sense would be really difficult. I feel I have the memory of a
Yeah.
goldfish.
Yeah.
um,
Some
but
some parts were like harder to remember. But a lot of the significant moments, are just sort of ingrained.
yeah, I guess
And
that's true.
then, friends and family, like if there were questions about childhood stuff, like I was able to, have some conversations there. Um, but yeah, I feel like it's like I mentioned, it feels like it's been trapped in my head for a long time. So it was actually like, okay, finally I can put this all down and then I can organize how it all fits together as a book later. So that's sort of how I
Absolutely.
approached it.
Yeah. So is it like a nice release after that? You felt like so cleansed?
Yeah, honestly, it was like, I mean, I've done therapy over the years. It was extremely therapeutic and like also really taxing emotionally. Like I kind of had to make a rule with myself where I'd like write for hours and then I would go cycling on my bike somewhere. Um, and then I had a rule that I wasn't allowed to then read it or get back into it after I was done exercising because that was sort of shutting it down for the day. Otherwise, I would have trouble sleeping and that sort of thing. So
Yeah,
that
really smart.
took a while to figure out, but once I did that, I was like, okay, this is perfect. This routine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Um, sorry, I'm jumping over you, Cody, probably, but
Oh, you could.
so you mentioned cycling and kind of how that was a nice release for you. Have what and we're fitness bros, so
Oh,
for
really? I had
better
no
or worse,
idea.
for better or worse. But can you talk to us a little bit about how like your relationship with fitness changed and how you kind of use that through your journey?
Yeah. I've always loved exercise. I really fell in love with road cycling when I lived in Santa Barbara because it was so necessary to get to class and stuff, from the dorms. And Santa Barbara, I don't know if you've been, but it's like a cyclist, heaven. So that was
Big
my
time.
stress relief for like many, many years. I found it, all the way through transition. I honestly don't know if I'd be like as okay as I am today without that. I would just go for 20, 25 miles a day, every other day or so. And it just helped really process my thoughts. Um, I think as I've gotten older, and had a child, there's less time to just go and mess around for a few hours on my bike. So now it's primarily the gym, which I don't find as helpful. Um, but I do think working on, building some of the upper body stuff helps with any sort of lingering dysphoria. So that's something that I found with cycling. You don't really build up in that same way as like doing weights, right? Um, so that's been good to sort of find that, a bit later in life.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, with I because I've never been well, I like riding my bike, but I've never been able to do distance like that. Like, but I imagine that kind of mental break can almost be like meditative.
Yeah, it's a beautiful space. Cody, do you do much cardio stuff?
I used to like I used to be a runner, so before lifting days, I used to do quite a bit of that, and then I would ride my bike when I was injured from running.
Okay.
So small experience with riding my bike, but not as much as running. But
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
Do
it
you
is.
miss that stuff, Cody? That meditative run, or
sometimes
did you not get that from running?
no, I definitely did. It was like my gym before I went to the gym, so it was something I did every day, and that's when I'd solve problems. Was when I'd think. It was definitely meditative. But then, you get older and your knees fall apart. Now, if I run, get my knee all swole. So I just stick to lifting and walking, which my past running self would be like, "You're just walking? Wow, okay."
Yeah,
But
getting older is humbling for sure.
But
mhm.
I can't imagine what our past selves would think if
Also
they
true.
saw us now.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
excited we'd be.
Yeah, seriously.
um, yeah. Questions. Um, can you tell us well, so I guess you kind of already mentioned this, but was there anything in particular that, well, never mind, you actually did that with the COVID you mentioned. Um, what do you think was the biggest challenge of writing it all? Was it scary? Was it the whole process itself? What kind of tell me a little bit about the challenges that you had?
Biggest challenge. I think putting it in a format, it was just really scary to be so
Yeah, that's what I
vulnerable.
imagine.
Like I wrote it. I'm I've always been, I don't want to say stealth because I do, come out to people, that are close to me and sometimes to coworkers, but I am not as visible as you both are. Like I've never really, you know, been so vulnerable. I really try and feel things out before I, tell people, and I keep my identity pretty separate from my professional life. I'm always nervous about bringing things up and how people will perceive me. So to write the book, it was like, I wrote it thinking like, okay, I'm going to be in corporate America until I, retire one day. I need to make sure that whenever I write here, like I could give to a boss and it's not going to, be too scary to do that. But also be, vulnerable. Like this is my one chance to like put out there what I think is really important and helpful for people to see, the more like social aspects of transition, the more internal aspects, the things that aren't so obvious, like physical changes. Um, so I just stayed true to myself too. So finding that balance was a little challenging. There's definitely some stuff that I initially wrote and then took out. I didn't want to focus too heavily on like intimacy and things like that because again, you got to be a little
Yeah.
careful thinking about who's going to read it. Um, but yeah, that was probably the most challenging bit besides, the emotional taxing part of it.
Yeah. And I think Cody and I have both talked about that. It's like it can be so scary when you're doing that kind of thing. And like we've talked a lot about the haters online and all that stuff. Have you had any kind of negatives, or if you've felt pretty positive? I haven't had a pretty positive experience.
Yeah, so I haven't really had any negative stuff thus far. But to be frank, my book came out and then all the political stuff really, has imploded. Um, so I think I held back a little bit from trying to put it out there more because I'm scared of that very thing.
Yeah.
I have a lot of admiration and respect for you both being so open. Like I imagine it's horrendous, the things that people say and message. Um, I did write an article for HuffPost a few years ago about
Oh, very cool.
going through IVF to get eggs so that we could have, a child that was linked to me in that way. And the comments on that were horrendous. But I didn't read them. My wife
Yeah.
was like, "Do not read these," and I was like, you
The
know,
best.
yeah, so she's always looking out. I'm like a little lamb,
Yep.
and she's protecting me. But there was a couple ridiculous ones like, you didn't have to go through all this to have a child, and it was like that's not the point of this. Like transitioning and then coming off hormones, it was
Yeah.
crazy. But anyway, that was the closest I guess I've come. So I'm still waiting for the Band-Aid to be ripped off, for the book. I'm sure it's coming.
Hopefully
Well,
not.
hopefully
Knock on
not.
wood.
I'd love that.
Maybe it'll
I'm an
just
optimist. Yeah.
Yeah.
at least
Well,
like
and
with
I
books,
Sorry,
they're
my
not.
cat is just won't leave me alone.
I feel like at least with books, they're not like blogs where people can digitally type a comment into your book, and
Yeah.
you're just like, damn
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah, that's very true. And they don't know what my address is, so I'm not getting mail yet or anything.
Yeah,
right, right.
that's always good.
Yeah.
Well, and it's always good. Cody and I both have ladies in our lives who help shield us, so and
Yeah.
and remind us that to stay away from that shit. I know Maddie gets
Yeah.
very pushy when she's like, "Stop reading those damn comments."
Yeah. It's just so I just can't understand why somebody would spend their time doing that. Like if you don't want to know about it or you don't think it's right or whatever, like go follow someone else's Instagram. I don't understand. But that's a whole other topic, right?
Definitely
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
sport or an insecurity of their own. They just can't
Yeah,
help themselves. So,
yeah, yeah.
know.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy what people will say out there. But I think the other nice side of this is like the community that it can build, right? And that kind of like you're speaking to some people who like haven't really seen that or you're reaching what I always like to tell people why I like to do this stuff, open stuff, is I'm like, well, there's a kid in the Midwest who feels alone right now. And I'm like, we just got to be out there and good examples that we can make it, right? Um, have you seen the other side? Have you got some of those kind of nice positive feedbacks about it?
Yeah, I've definitely had some really nice things. I think, you know, thus far, it was only released in November, and I think because I've been a little bit nervous to, say more about it, a lot of the folks that have read it are people that I know, friends and family and prior coworkers that knew about me, because I transitioned at work. So there's a set of people that are very aware of what happened.
Yeah.
But it was cool, like, for them to say, I had no idea you were feeling this way. I had no idea you were thinking these things. That was really special because I'm sure you can relate. So much of transition is so isolating. Like, I remember it makes me feel emotional still thinking back to, like, I don't know, years 1 through 3 or 4 were like the most isolating, I think, for me. Um, and I just remember wanting to feel connected to people about how I was feeling and just not being able to find that. Um, so to be able to put it out there now and feel, even in retrospect, like people understanding what I felt at that time, it was nice to feel a little less lonely in that. So that's been really special, people validating that, I would say.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Can I ask some mindset questions a little bit off the topic?
Sure.
I love it.
So when it comes to like writing a book, that can be pretty overwhelming to think about. So like, how do you struggle with like feeling resistant to sitting down and writing sometimes? Did you procrastinate? How did you kind of get around that? Because I know there's probably some days where you're just like, I don't know where to go from here, and like, how did you push through that?
Yeah. And the timing of COVID was um helpful, and I had just started it, and then COVID happened. Obviously horrendous for many reasons, but in terms of being furloughed and having just time, I found the initial kind of writing of it pretty seamless because I just wanted to. I had so many thoughts, like I said, I just wanted to get them out. Um, the taxing part, though, was, I sought out feedback from some like professional services. You can go online, read, see, in some of these sites. The taxing part of it was having to rewrite it multiple times. I think I probably 3, 4, 5 times, like had to restructure it and get some feedback and redo it again. And those were those were the times where I was like, I don't want to look at this thing anymore. Like
Yeah.
because I'd have to dive back in typing about my dysphoria and just like horrible memories. Um, but I just kept pushing because I was like, there's no world in which I don't finish this. Like this has to be done. Um, so it was just a matter of like forcing myself to just keep pushing through. I tend to get up very early naturally, like 4 a.m. So I would use those first few hours of the day, to really just be like, okay, I'm going to write until I have to get ready for work. And I would do it in chunks of time like that, and never at the end of the day, like I was saying before, just because I couldn't sleep. Yeah, and then when my wife was pregnant with our son, like in 2022, he was born in 23, I kept needing to rewrite the last or finish the last chapter. And you guys aren't parents yet, or right? Um, the like the lack of sleep and the lack of alone time in these things, I like could not bring myself to do it. It's like, oh, I have to write this thing. But I just remember I got to a point where I was like, I gotta finish this. And he was napping one day. I was like, okay, I'm gonna write the last chapter, and I did it while he was sleeping. So yeah,
The ultimate deadline.
yeah.
Yeah,
I was
create
like,
some sense of urgency.
yeah, before the cries start. No, so Cody, to answer your question, it was just, I'm a driven person by nature. That's just like how I've always been. But it really took some pushing to just like keep that in mind. Like, I have to finish this and then finally just get these chunks done.
Good.
I was just saying, good job just getting it done. 'Cause
Thank
I
you.
I'd
can't.
overthink everything. I would just be a mess. So
No, thank you. I must say I've watched a lot of your stuff on anxiety and those pieces, and it it's hard when something is finished. It's easy to just talk about how you did it, but yeah, the anxiety around revisiting these topics and having to sit in these spaces again, retyping these chapters. My wife, I think, got pretty over it at the end, because it's like coming out of a whirlwind, when you're writing about some of the hardest times in your life. Um, so I definitely, had some struggles with managing the anxiety associated with that. So I don't want to skim over that as if that didn't exist.
yeah,
It sounds
understandably
almost
so.
like prep. It's one big build up to one thing that you just like so narrow have to be almost narrowly focused on.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there's a deadline, but there's so much to do before the deadline. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It sounds like routine is something that you really enjoy it from. Is that how you make
Yes.
things kind of work?
Yes. I feel so seen right now.
You're in the
I
right
was
We are
space.
routine lovers.
that's so funny. No one's like said that to me directly except my wife. Yeah, I love routine. I find, yeah, such stability in it. And I think as an adult, anxiety has always been the one thing that I have to constantly navigate, and like I've found routine and predictability and that kind of structure um in the day to day is super helpful. So yes, routine is yeah.
Did you have a big celebration after you finished? Did you like celebrate it?
Um I think we've we had a party at the house
Okay,
when it
good.
was, yeah, when it was the month after it was released. And it was just sort of like, we just bought a house, and my book kind of all fell in the same year, so it was like just sort of a party to celebrate, those successes. Yeah.
Very cool.
Good.
Yeah. So
Always
like,
important to look back.
did
Celebrate the
your
good.
family read it? Like I don't know. Like I feel like if I wrote a book, I'd be like, who's gonna read this? My parents gonna read this? Like what's happening?
Yeah,
um,
my parents have been very supportive of the whole thing. I know I'm very fortunate to have, their support from the beginning. They read all the versions, and you know, I I have a, had a challenging relationship with my brother over the years. Um, but it was really beautiful because we came together. He has a quote in the book, and you know, he was able to contribute and kind of give his sign off that, like, yes, this is good. I agree with what you've written. So that was kind of therapeutic for us in terms of relationship. Um, and my grandmother, who is 96 in April, she lives in England. Um, she read it, and that was cool. Like just
That's
to
very
know
cool.
that she's there, in her home and showing her friends this book. So
Yeah.
that was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you
So,
have like when you're writing your book, did you have a specific audience in mind that you wanted it to like reach, or specifically like I want these types of people or whatever to read, like trans kids or youth or whatever, just anyone, like, yeah, what audience did you have in mind?
well, it's sort of two main ones. I'd say what I really wanted was for like I wanted to sort of humanize the trans experience as much as I could so that it would be like digestible for people that are on the more conservative side of the spectrum, not necessarily just politically, maybe just in life.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought, if I write the book and I talk about basically becoming an adult, like, going to college, getting a job, getting married, having a child, like these things. Not that everybody's path is that, right? But that was for me like what I wanted to do. And then amidst all that is the transition and the struggle. And I wanted people to sort of realize like, wow, he's just trying to like live a life that he's, sees for himself. And it just so happens that he's trans. And oh my gosh, he had to also do all of these other things on top of just trying to like become a successful adult. Um, and I felt like it was important to capture just the day to day and how things felt throughout, a lot of that. Um, I think too, when we talk about how people perceive trans people, there's such an immense focus on, all the bottom surgery questions and just the absurdity around what people have in their pants, just this insane. So I thought if I can sort of call that out and then say, hey, let's talk about all these other things. I hoped that people who are a little put off by the physical components of transition would recognize like or be able to feel some sense of relatability to some of the other parts,
Yeah.
like mindset and just getting through something challenging. I hoped that it was going to resonate. Um, that was a long answer. Just, am I making sense with that?
Yes, totally. No, I and I think that's a great, audience to keep in mind because I feel like that helps kind of create a bridge with the huge, huge gap that is right now. But maybe it's just
Oh
perfect
yeah.
timing, because there's definitely a lot of people that just don't understand us. I feel like there's some that just at base level don't understand and have some ignorance. There's people who like purposefully misunderstand us. So maybe you could like reach some of those who are just kind of ignorant about it, and then at least we, don't have just everyone like jumping on the trans hate train.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That is really the intent. So I'm hopeful. I really would love, just somebody who just all they know about trans people is all this negative stuff on the news, right? I'd love for them to pick it up and be like, wow, this is just like a normal, I don't want to say normal, just a person, who wants to live a life. I mean, my life, I had mapped out when I was 10 what I wanted. And it's the same path, regardless of the fact that I transitioned. And it's like, if somebody who has their own child who perhaps isn't trans can look at it and be like, wow, it sounds a lot like my son or my daughter. It's like, I just wanted people to see, like, I'm not that different. It's just this crazy other path, that's kind of done this through, the other parts of life. Um, the other audience to that I had in mind was like other trans people. I think it's super important to, of course, have, the um, the media and the ability to see kind of how the physical changes may come or how you can work with those parts of it. But I found when I was transitioning, when I talked about the isolation piece, like I didn't see a lot about like how is this affecting your relationships? what about dating? Like, what about, coming out in a corporate work setting, navigating all the legal nonsense? Like, I didn't really see that. Um, and so I was like, this to me has been far harder than the physical pieces. Like, the physical parts are hard, top surgery, stressful and emotional, but like, I will say, dealing with my mind and society and all the ways in which people changed towards me over the course of the last 10 years, I was like, where are we talking about that? So that was the other audience I was hoping to reach.
No, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I feel like you're really successful in like both of those quests. I
Thank you.
think that definitely it just felt like a coming of age story almost like very much like I know we don't want to say normal, but like it was very like growing up, kind of just someone aging, anybody is what it felt like. Not to diminish anything that you went through, but that it's the flavor it had, and the thing that I really connected with was that sense of isolation, that the relationship idea. I remember at one point you just mentioned how like you weren't relating to your friends as much. Not that it was necessarily a terrible thing, but like it was different, and I don't know before I read your book if I had really heard people talking about that, because I was also someone who had almost all of my friends were lesbians.
Yeah,
It was that's who I hung out with,
right.
and it was a learning experience for everybody when I came out, because it was like little things that they did, like referring to me as a lesbian or the lesbians, and like weird things like that, where it's like we need to break those habits, but like it was just something that I really connected with, and I really appreciated you sticking that part out, because I think that is something that's really overlooked.
It is.
Um,
It so is. I
Yeah,
totally
agree.
agree. Like that, you like grow up in the queer community and then suddenly you're not recognized anymore, and it's like, the perception that I'm like, the irony of it to me, over the last 10 years is being trans has become so much more visible and talked about, right? That in our own community, you go to I go to a bar with my wife before children, of course. And like nobody's putting together that perhaps I'm trans. Like, and I know this is passing privilege, right? But the immediate assumption is that we are like gay best friends because we're in a queer space. And I'm like, guys, like, let's, let's take a step back here. What did you just see on the news? Like, what is everywhere right now? And that has driven me nuts for years. Like being perceived gay as, by cis straight people out in the world, it's like, okay, like I get it, that's fair. I'm not as masculine as other men. I'm a little bit animated, fine. Not to stereotype, but in the queer community, I found it very strange, that is just completely skipped over, that's a possibility. Do you guys, does that happen to you too?
infuriating sometimes.
Yeah, when you're out with your partners, do you get this too, this confusion about your relationship?
They think we're trad people. Like I get like they think we are not queer.
That's
we
cool.
well, and I think but it's not. It is to an extent, but like, and I know again this is dripping in privilege. I
Right,
understand that, but
right.
like also in Southern Ohio now, so like I dress in flannel and jeans. Like I'm very basic, and they just think that we are like almost Republican, and I'm like, oh
I
no, I've
almost.
overcorrected.
Just so close.
and,
I overcorrected. It's so
and
good.
and so like right now I'm dealing with a lot of like, I think people just give me the strike. Like they are like, oh, that's a white cis man. Let's stay away from him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, you're just missing me. And then it's
Yeah.
like weird, because it's like now I just feel like I have to come out immediately, and it's so
Yeah.
yes, I could that it drives
That's
me
the other
crazy.
side of it, right? It's like if you're being read as how you're a cis white man, right? So that's
Right.
also not good. I totally get that. That's so fun. What about you, Cody? I'm curious.
I think we definitely get seen as just like an average couple, kind of like Cal's experience. But I feel like, that's cool, like blending in. I'm not mad at that. But when you are in a queer space, there is a question of like, how am I being perceived right now? Like, then you try to like be like, guys, I'm trans. Like, don't calm
Yeah.
down. Like, I'm trans. And we're queer, we're here. Don't kick us out.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
swear I'm cool. I swear.
Yeah. Yeah. I swear I understand.
I
Um,
swear I've been to Tegan and Sarah concerts too. It's fine. Like we're gonna be okay.
yeah. I think one of the factors with me and my wife that adds to the confusion is that my wife has short hair. Um, and I think the world stereotypes that as like lesbian.
Yeah.
So I think that adds to it a bit because I've had partners in the past um that had longer hair and it was a little bit different. So that's another piece that you know,
Interesting.
yeah,
Well,
people are just
people
confused.
are weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, and well, and everybody just wants to label something. I know because it also, and I know it's been like not necessarily a concern that Maddie has, but she does think it's weird because Maddie is pansexual, and not to talk about her while she's not on here to defend herself, but like I know she gets frustrated too because it's like I like suck her queerness away
Yes.
almost, and it's like I'm sorry, I don't know what we're doing. It's somehow we've gotten erased. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
We did it to
Um,
ourselves.
no. Um, but
It's a
yeah,
mind trip, right? Like, and
right. It's weird.
this is what I'm talking about. Like, having these conversations, I feel like is so important. Um, because otherwise you're just like stuck in your own head or with your partner, like trying to figure out how to be visible, not be visible. Like you were saying, how, like come out, don't come out. And you're like, I just want to exist. Like, I just want to go out, be with
Right.
my people and like live my life. It feels lovely to even just be chatting about it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know the other one that and I remember someone straight told me this a long time ago when I first transitioned. So take it with a grain of salt, and cisgendered, and he was problematic in other ways. But he said something about like when I first came out, and this was when I was not passing at all. I had not had top surgery, I don't think. And he was like, you need to make sure that you're understanding how you're being taken by women as well, because it's like you are now more of a threat, and I agree with that, and well, from their point of view, right? And it can be so tricky because I've always had a lot easier time having a relationship with women and females. Like I didn't grow up with boys really, so I kind of was always more close with females. So it was really hard for me to kind of adjust and make friends like that too. Did you experience that as well?
Yeah, the shift in relationships with women, I think, was another like hugely jarring, because through college I was just like this masculine woman, and I I had a very easy time dating. It was just like fun, honestly.
Mhm.
Like I was like, can I just do this forever? Like I wish I could, fighting this internal feeling. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, transitioning was like brutal to that reality. Like suddenly women just like didn't seem like just looked straight through me. I found myself feeling super concerned that I was like being too sitting too close to them, walking too close to them, like you were saying, a threat.
Yeah.
Um, you know, just in everyday life, it changed literally everything in my relationship with women. And that took many years to adjust to. And I think still now makes me a bit sad to have lost that, hey, I'm completely safe, feeling. And that drives a bit of the feeling of wanting to come out because I want them to be like, you know, hey, don't worry about him.
Right.
Especially starting new jobs. Like I just started a new job a few weeks ago and I manage people and stuff and like I have to be so deliberate about how I interact with all the staff. Like, just make sure that I'm, just considering all these things all the time. Like, and I feel like that will be a forever work in progress. Honestly, I don't know if I've got it figured out totally. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot to be said with that. Part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
It's hard.
Yeah.
So while we're on the kind of the topic of community and relationships, um, what have you been able to find community? Have you in the trans community? Is it something that you've been able to have in person, or you kind of look for that more online, or you focus more on different aspects of your personality to kind of find community?
Um, I think I've always struggled to find community, to be frank. I think in the beginning stages of my transition, I felt like even relationships I had with other trans men, so much of it was around solely talking about, hormones and surgeries and all of these, again, physical pieces. And I sort of at times tried to push for like, let's talk about some of the stuff that you're like feeling inside. But I don't necessarily think I had the language at that time to like really talk about it like I can now, 10 years later. Um, or maybe the people weren't wanting to speak on that level. But that added to the isolation because it's like you meet another trans person, you're like, okay, perfect. Like we're going to relate on everything. And then you just don't. They're like, oh yeah, they're just another person who has likes and dislikes, and maybe this isn't what they want to be chatting about. Um, so that was a struggle. But I will say my crew in Austin, when I was there for about 6 years, that's where I transitioned after I left Santa Barbara. Um, that was a overall just a really great accepting queer space. Like I've never seen a community like I did in Austin. Even though it was challenging to deal with how the perception of me was shifting in like queer bars and things like that. Um, I do feel like I was very, you know, accepted and part of that community with my friends, like before and after transition. But since leaving Austin in 2018, when I moved to Jersey, that's where I met my wife, and that came with a whole new community. But we have never been able to find like queer community that has felt like home like that since, I would
Yeah.
say. Um, yeah, it's just hard once you look like this
So
and
far.
we do, and now we live in the suburbs because we're parents. Like it's, you know, I don't know. I don't know how to find it now. And I was hopeful that the book would sort of give some, leeway to that.
Absolutely. Cody and I have talked about that a lot. How and remember were we just talking about that like 2 episodes ago? How it's
I
like
think so.
everybody wants to just push trans people together because you have that one thing in common, and you're like, well,
Yeah,
we don't have anything else in common.
literally. Yeah.
I know it's so painful.
It's yeah, and then you have these like you try and you have these meetups and then you like have the meetup or something and then you come away like I don't relate to anybody. Like we relate on one level, but we are so different. I think that's another thing people forget is like the trans community in itself is so diverse. We're all so different. We have different hobbies, interests, opinions. We're not just all the same.
Not a
So
monolith. What?
yeah.
Yeah, it's bizarre, like how that somehow like adds to the isolation too. You're like when you meet this person you're supposed to connect with. I wrote about that in my book in the very beginning. 10 years ago there was maybe it was where I was, but there was just like a lot less trans people. It felt like I knew like one person, right? And I wasn't heavily involved in like the online community. Like I never really got into watching YouTube, which might have been helpful, but like I just didn't really do that at that time in my life. But I met this one trans person and we went and had coffee and I was like so excited. I was like, okay, we're going to connect, it's going to be like, I'm going to say something and he's going to go, me too. And I mean, none of it, like it was so painful at that time. And I left, like, I think I cried because I was like, I had built it up in my head so much that there was going to be just this beautiful, connection. So that was like painful, but also helpful for the future, being like, okay, I I need to be a little bit more careful about my expectations going into relationships that just just have the commonality of transition. Um, and I think that led later on to like, and I wrote about this too because this felt really helpful. Like I found such immense connection with people that are not trans that have gone through really hard shit that like takes you down to like the rawest form of yourself, right? Which is how I view my transition. Like people that have gone through really difficult things have also felt these similar feelings of like being so raw and isolated. And I, I was really taken aback when that first started happening, but I realized I had to let that in. Like I had to recognize like, okay, I may not connect with every trans person in the world, but like how beautiful it is that I can connect with someone that's gone through something so differently. Um, and that's led to feeling a lot less lonely over the years, and it's really beautiful when you find it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's yeah,
That used to
definitely a
be
good
one of
way.
my dating requirements. You've been through something hard.
yeah, right. Because we're not going to relate otherwise.
Yeah, you're not gonna get it. I don't have time.
yeah,
You have to
Yeah.
have some trauma,
yeah,
right?
You
yeah,
have to have something. I want a receipt for a therapist
yeah,
first.
yeah, right.
Um,
It's sad, but it's so true, right? Like you
it's
just there has to be some trauma there.
yeah.
Yes.
Uh, well, I want to be respectful of your time, but I have one more question.
Yeah.
And what is your favorite piece of advice that you've gotten before?
Favorite piece of advice? Yeah, I don't mean to sound cliche, but I think, my parents have always just said, just be you.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, part of the reason why I highlighted my relationship in the book with my parents, there's the recognizing that it's unique. But also like I wanted other parents to read it and be like, I can accept my trans child like these people did, and they have this beautiful relationship with their son. So I really wanted to like highlight that part of it. And at the core of that relationship is like, just be you. Like, this is all you can do. And my wife echoed a similar um, piece of advice and really like drove that home when we met. Because when we met, she's Italian and has this huge Italian family. And I was nervous to meet all of them because there was like 100. And she, she again reiterated that same advice, like, just be you. People are going to love you. Like, just be you. It's okay. And we'd be in these settings. And, I was really struggling with the insecurity 2018 when I first moved to Jersey and we had just met. And we'd be in these situations and she would look at me when she knew I was struggling and with those, like, just be you eyes, like, you're okay. Everything's fine. Um, and that has just stayed with me through all the things that are challenging, meeting new people, starting a new job, those feelings of doubt start to come up. People think I'm weird, people think I'm different. And then I just like, James, just be yourself. And that's all you can do. And it's like very grounding. So that's,
That's great.
yeah, that's been helpful.
I love that.
What about you guys? I'm
Um,
curious.
go ahead, Cody.
Best advice that,
Oof. Oh man. I mean, that's a hard one. I guess I would just say like just patience like with your transition, but just how your life kind of evolves because it's going to change. It's inevitable. As you change, things are going to change. And people are learning alongside of you a lot of times. So I feel like with the current climate, sometimes it could be so easy to like cut people out if they don't immediately like understand you or your get your pronouns right and stuff like that. But it's just like like they're new to this too. It's one thing getting to know someone's intention versus you know an accident. And I think that's just like always look at someone's intentions first with things. So you don't want to like distance yourself from people who are good people who are just like kind of struggling with, getting words right and stuff like that. And just know like it always gets better. And it's like if I was looking back to, you know, 10 years ago when I first started this, like when you first start, like it's in your mind constantly, like how you're being perceived and like the next surgery and all that stuff. And then you get to this point where you just get to live your life. And so it's just like, just know at some point you are going to just get to live and you won't even have to think about anything. And that's wild, even on its own.
Yeah.
So it gets better, essentially.
Yeah.
It gets better. I like that. I struggle a lot with like fear, especially when I was growing up. I was I've always been a very scared kid by nature. But it was not until I graduated or I don't know, like senior year of high school, I just stopped. Like, I'm just going to try it once. If I try it once and I hate it, I don't have to do it again. So it's just the idea of like trying it once, just do it once. And then you can make your decision, but you have to at least try it first, because I always would talk myself out of the try. And I think it wasn't until I did that I really discovered anything, to be completely frank, because I was just a bundle of fear before.
That's great. Yeah, just give it a try. I love that.
Yep.
Try.
Yeah.
One try. That's all. So we're definitely going to link to the book in the show notes, but where can people find you if they want to connect? And
Yeah,
like push an Instagram or anything?
Yeah, I do have an Instagram. I think it's Mr. James Bennett is my Instagram. I was so excited when I transitioned. I was like,
Perfect.
I gotta just make it my name, you know?
I love it.
I've been waiting
Absolutely.
forever for this.
Yeah.
Use it for everything.
Yeah, I'd love to connect, and I'd love to hear, if people, I I'm hopeful that people will read it, but also give it to their friends and family to help garner sort of understanding. Because obviously I'm like one trans person, right? Like my experience is very different than others, I'm sure, and the same in some ways. But I think just this like sort of the humanizing aspect of it all, I think is helpful across the board for people to understand. Um, so yeah, that's what I'm really hopeful for. If people can sort of use this to connect with their family and friends too,
Absolutely. I love
Yeah.
that. I think that's a great way to end.
Mhm.
Did you have anything else, Cody, that you
I
wanted
would
to
just
ask?
say it sounds like a great gift for like parents
Yeah.
almost to help understand their own, whether it's an adult kid or whatnot, just to be like, hey, here's what it might look like if you just first start your transition and they're having a hard time grasping what it might look like in the future or the whole process. So they get an insider's look ahead of time.
Yeah, and just like help with the acceptance piece of it, hopefully. I think, what ends up happening with so many trans people and their families is absolutely horrendous, and there just needs to be like more connection about like what it actually is that trans people go through, so that there's some understanding. So I'm helpful if I can help contribute to that in any way. It's a success. And I got to say, I feel so honored to be talking to you both today. And I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity just to even connect, regardless of my book. Like, I just really have to thank you for that.
Thanks for coming on and talking to us.
Yeah,
Absolutely. It's been a great conversation.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. I'd love to meet you both eventually, especially you, Cody, being
Absolutely.
close, in the same
Yeah.
state.
Yeah.
Same state.
Same state.
Absolutely.
Same coast.
Yeah.
West Coast, best coast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Still trying to get Kel over here, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Come on.
hey,
Come on.
I know. You guys would just make it a little cheaper out there.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, there's
ooh.
always Fresno and Bakersfield.
Yeah,
That's true. I have been to Fresno.
It's close to Yellowstone.
I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it. All right. So we always close out with a power talk, and so I'm just gonna read the one that I pulled for today. It's from Alan Watts. The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge in, move with it, and join the dance. I guess that's kind of a little bit along with my favorite advice. Just jump in and go for the change. So I think that's what we'll leave the listeners with. And thank you all.
Perfect.
Great conversation.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Till later.
Bye.
Bye.